So I imagine that dealing with emotions in a real mediation must be like opening a Pandora's box. You never know what you will find in there. How has this been in your experience? How do you deal with emotions in a mediation?
Well, one of the advantages of being an English mediator or British mediator and working in London and the UK mainly is that we all keep a lid on our emotions in the UK, and it's just a cultural thing, and that's certainly something I was brought up with. And so, particularly if it's quite lawyer intensive, it can be quite academic. But then when the emotions come out and come through, it can be quite dramatic as well. I've certainly, I think, had most emotions in a mediation over the last 20 years or so, from extreme anger, people shouting, threats of physical violence, tears. It all happens. And for someone like me, because like most lawyers, you remove your emotions at law school so you can be an effective lawyer, you have to learn how to deal with this. And certainly in my early mediation days, I used to try and shut the emotions down and give people time and say, oh, well, we'll give you a few minutes and I'll come back in when you've recovered. Now I realise just how important it is to work out why it is so emotional. What is it that is causing this reaction, whether it's one of anger or as I say, tears of grief, because sometimes one's dealing with some very distressing situations, and they may be personal situations involving the death or illness of a loved one, or it may be the destruction of a dream where you had a business that you had put years and years of your life into and it's all gone wrong and you're blaming someone. And what you have to do is to work out what the emotions are and whether they're real. People play the mediator. People can manufacture emotions, and that's something else that you have to be alive to. But I think the other thing that I do quite a lot in a mediation where people are getting very emotional, it's very often when they're telling the story, when they're reliving what's led them to this point. I have to be quite firm with them, I think, and I have to say, look, this is really interesting, but I don't think you're paying me to be sympathetic. I think you're paying me in order to try and help you find a solution today. Now, there are lots of people who can listen to the story and empathise with you, and I try and be sympathetic, but you have to move people on. I think some of the other ways you deal with it is to try and understand why it is so emotional. And I can think of one mediation in particular, which involved the death of a child, and it was clearly very emotional for the parents, as you would expect. It was cathartic, perhaps, in the way they were able to release their emotions. And I realised what I was trying to help them to do was to find closure. And their lawyers hadn't realised this, and so I had to actually shut their lawyer up and say, I think your client wants to say something. I think your client's had enough. And actually, that's part of the role of the mediator sometimes, is to tell the parties' lawyers to back off and to give the client the space to find a solution. But sometimes the emotions run the day, and I've certainly had cases where I didn't dare put the two parties in the same room. We never had an opening session because it would probably end in violence or just shouting, or it would lead to people going backwards in terms of the mediation process. Because you talk to each room separately, and even with high emotions, they still want to find a solution because they can see that it's not helping them. It may be terribly time consuming, it might be really expensive. There may be all sorts of reasons why they want a solution, but what they cannot do is negotiate face to face. And so you have to respect that. It is their day, not yours, and you have to allow the parties to have a very significant influence over the day. And I've certainly learned that even where you find a solution, the emotions may still be running high. And I don't think it's part of my role to act as the amateur psychotherapist to sort out all their emotions during the day. My role is to help them find a solution to the commercial dispute that's led them to go to mediation. And it may be when they leave with the solution, they'll still feel angry, but hopefully, having resolved this particular dispute, they'll then be able to move on in their lives and deal with that.